Hi, I'm Bob Boyd, and I'm a devotee of organic architecture. My final career was as an industrial designer, and my daughter asked me to design a home for her recently, and I've been working on it actually now for about 2 years. And in accordance with the principles of organic architecture, we're basing the floor plan on rectangles and diamonds intersecting. And the vertical module is 8 inches because we feel we might use single score concrete blocks. As a result of that, I decided it would be nice to have some decorative tile inserts that were based on the same 8-inch module. So I started working out some designs on SketchUp, and then I made some sample tiles just to kind of prove the process. And in order to do that, this tile I made first one out of plaster Paris. Really don't like working with that stuff. And this one's made out of mortar. And in order to do that, I first made a pattern for the tile. Now I do artwork, and my artwork generally consists of smooth geometric inserts and a background of canvas stretched over lightweight plywood forms. So I made this pattern using that process, mounted on a piece of plywood, a little under 8 inches square because typically you have a 3/8 inch mortar joint. And I put these, you can see the plywood inserts. This is actually masonite on the top of this one. You can see where I filled some screw holes with Bondo. And this is canvas stretched over lightweight plywood forms. And then I gave it several coats of polyester resin, sanding between the coats so I had a smooth surface. And to get a uniform texture on everything, I just lightly misted it with spray shellac from a distance and just let it mist on just to give it a slight texture. And when I made the tiles, I made the molds of silicone molding compound. It's OOMA 25 is what I use, I think. I have the brochure here. OOMOO 25 is what I used. It has a cure time that worked for me. It's the first time I've ever worked with it. But in any event, it was easy to make the mold. What I basically did was simply put pieces of 1x2 around the edge of this to make a dam, similar to this one you see right here, and sealed it with a little bit of caulking in the corner so that the mold compound couldn't slide out. Seep out through cracks, and then just mixed the mold compound according to the instructions. Was very careful to follow the instructions because I had read a lot of bad reviews, and maybe the bad review is because of the product, but more likely it's because of the person using it not following instructions. So in any event, made the mold that way. But when I got this one done, I decided I wasn't happy with it because it didn't have enough dimension for me, and it wasn't reflective enough of the canvas stretched over forms that I use in my artwork. So I decided to design another one, and the second one I designed is like this here, and I have it in the mold right at the moment. So we'll pop it out, and that's what this tile looks like. When I was doing it, I made a pattern for both a left and a right tile. So I'm going to pour the mortar in a mold today and show you how to make one of these tiles. This mold I have right here shows you how I put the dams around the edges of the tile of the pattern, and this shows you how the pattern comes off. And this is one of the patterns for the current tile. There's a little bit of color over here because I sprayed it several coats. Well, after I coated it with polyester resin, I sanded it. I primed it with fast build automotive primer. Sanded a few more times. When I got back to it, there was still a little flaw here, so I sanded that out before I went over it with the shellac. So this is one of the patterns. When I do the patterns, I number. When I take I have to take the outside pieces off in order to get the mold off the pattern, and so I number the pattern, and I number each of the pieces so that this is 6-1 right here, so I know where it goes so I can put it back on if I want to make another mold. So that's basically how we do this. Now, to make the tiles, I have the 2 molds here. They're real flexible, but if they sit on a flat piece of plywood, I can pour the mortar in them and it'll work out just fine. I'm going to put this one over here out of the way for the time being while I mix up the mortar. It's important to follow instructions. I'm really advising against working with plaster of Paris because I think it's very dangerous. You certainly want to wear a dust mask because if you inhale that stuff, it's bad, and for goodness sakes, don't pour any mortar or plaster of Paris down household drains because it will plug them up tight. So from experience, I know I need about 3/4 of a quart of water. I'll end up with about 1.5 quarts of mortar when I'm done. It almost doubles in volume as you mix it. And it's important to add the mortar to the water, not the other way around, or you end up with just a lot of lumps. And I have to try to work out the air bubbles so I don't get air bubbles in these as I work on it. So I'm going to get my mortar right now. Stuff I'm using here is Rapid Set mortar mix. Got it at Home Depot. Works fine. I'll put on my dust mask because I don't want to inhale any of this stuff either. Take a cup like this. Just shake it in slowly, about 1 cup at a time. Don't want to get it in too fast. I'm using a wood shingle to stir it. Paint stirring stick looks really good too. We have some longer, wider stir sticks at Home Depot for manly men. So they'd be perfect for this. Another cup of mortar. Now when people talk about mortar or concrete, they talk about it drying. And it does dry, but when it gets hard, it is not dried, it is hardened. And concrete hardens by means of an exothermic reaction. Once you mix water, and with the water is like a catalyst, and it starts a reaction that generates some heat and causes the mortar or concrete to start to set up. So this is something where you have a relatively limited amount of time to do it. Because once it's mixed, you'll notice that the bucket starts to get a little warm, and it'll turn hard pretty soon. When you're making something out of concrete or mortar, best to have a stiff mix. But in the case of these tiles, I can't make it too stiff or I'll end up with voids in it. So I'm going to have to make a little wetter mix than I would use if I were using it to lay concrete block. You'll notice at some point that the mortar starts to appear as a dry powder on the surface. That means you're starting to get a little closer to having the mix. It'll still go down in there, and you keep it broken up as you go here. Like I said at the beginning, this will almost double in volume. I'm going to have more than I need. It takes a little less than 1 quart of mortar to mold one of these tiles. So I'd rather come out with more than I need than less than I need. It's easy to get lumps in it. Trying to avoid lumps. Try to work them out by mushing them up against the side of the container. When it starts to get a little thicker, we want to be careful to mix it in such a way that we don't whip air into it, because air bubbles can make a mess. We have to get them out. And I use a technique I'll show you for getting the air bubbles out. Well, if I just let this sit for a little while, it would start to stiffen up. But letting it sit to stiffen up is not really a good idea. And if it starts to stiffen up, it's not a good idea to add water to thin it out either. It interferes with the strength of the mortar. Sort of a tedious process. Bricklayers would use a special machine to do this. Now we're getting to the point where everything I add thickens it. Now this is obviously way too soupy to use for bricklaying, but it's getting about to the consistency for the mold. I use these polyethylene buckets for mixing both the molding compound and the mortar because you can clean them out. Even if the mortar hardens in the bucket, you can flex the bucket and pop it out. Add a little bit more and that's it. Try to keep your hands out of the mortar too. It's not that easy on your skin. Dries it out. Got it sticking on my thumb over here. I think I'm gonna. Okay, I've got this mold sitting in here. That's fine. Got it down so it's flat. The molds are stiff enough to contain everything, so we don't need anything more to do that, really. Now what I do is go down in here with a plastic container, and I start by filling the lowest parts of the mold first. So we try to work our way into the low spots and up toward the higher spots. Same thing when you're making the mold and working your way around the pattern. Low spots first. And once I get a fair amount of material in here, I'll put that in there. Take my 50-cent paintbrush from Harbor Freight and work the mortar down into the mold. Try to get it into every last nook and cranny. There aren't very many nooks and crannies in this mold. I mean, it's pretty simple shape. But I try to get it down there so that I get any kinds of bubbles and so on out. I'm going to work my way over to the other mold here. Now I just added material. And we'll look a little closer. You see we're getting a thicker material down here at the bottom of the container. Now, it's important to have this on a level surface. looks like it might be a little low in the back, so when I add a little bit more, I fill it up all the way. I wouldn't really have to. Probably enough. Yeah, I'm gonna put a shim under the back of this. Too much of the shim. Well, that's a good shim. More on this side. I don't know what I do to kind of get the last of the air bubbles out. I take my little vibrator the last step. Just make sure that everything is level here. Now, mortar isn't really very strong, especially a soupy mix like this. So these tiles are just decorative. They'll be glued to a substrate. So what I'm going to do to ensure that they are as strong as they can be, I'll prop this one up a little bit here. I'm going to keep them as wet as possible for as long as possible. So what I do is this: I take a paper towel like this, lay it over the top, spray it with water. There's a key to getting strong mortar is making sure it doesn't dry. It has to set, it can't dry. So in order to set but not dry, we have to keep it wet. We can't let it dry out. And then I just take a garbage bag like this, and I have to shove these a little closer to each other. Put the garbage bag over the top, hold the moisture in, and we're done until tomorrow. I'll leave it for 24 hours and then we'll pop it out of the mold. There's one way to clean out these buckets. Just dump them into a plastic bag. And this stuff isn't wanting to come out very well at all. It's already setting up. But I'll go in with my glove and pull it out. And I'll hose it off outside. I will not put any of this down the drain. Well, today is the tomorrow I alluded to yesterday. So let's see what we've got. We've got the towel stuck to the back. This is the first time that's happened. Let's just pull this out and see if we have a good mold. Or a good cast, I should say. Comes out easily. And there it is. That's about as good as it gets. Still very wet. Should be kept that way for another day or two. Keep it in plastic. Everything cures really well. I should also point out that the angle of the insert here is sympathetic to the angle of the ceiling and the roof in the house that I designed. So we have the 8-inch module for the vertical module, and we have the angle sympathetic to the angle of the ceiling. And we'll take the plastic off this one. Yeah, once again, everything's stuck. That's all right. A little water will take that off later on. Let's see what we've got. Okay. Another one. Perfect. Made a little mark with my thumbnail. Came out absolutely perfect. So, using this, put this over here, move things around just a little bit. We can take a tile here. We can take a corresponding tile, put it here. Take another tile, we can have it down here like that. We can arrange these in all kinds of different clusters. Facing in, facing out. Of course, you know, they could be facing up and down in a different design. But anyway, this is what I came up with. I'm happy with it. I like the simplicity of it. When it comes to decor and organic architecture, I'm not so much attracted to the enormous amount of detail that Mr. Wright put in many of his projects. I sometimes like Rudolf Schindler's interiors better. They're very simple, not Bauhaus simple, but they have a pleasant feel to them. I'm after the emotional impact that the interior has, and so I think these will be quite nice. But I'm inspired to do other things, and I hope other people are as well. So this is how the process works. Come up with your own ideas, do something, show it to me on Facebook or on the website. Love to see it. Thank you.